Hey, I'm Scott, and this is the second video in a little series to introduce the new Pons pan and tilt motor modules from Zeapon for their Micro 2 sliders. In this video, we'll see how to set these up, either individually or together, how to get your camera on there, and how to operate them physically. If you want to see some basic specs or pricing, check out the first video in this playlist that I'll have linked down below, and check out the video after this to see how these work all together using the mobile app. So, let's get into it. Alright, so before diving in, I just want to once more disclose that this video is sponsored by Zeapon, and please keep in mind that it's meant as an instructional video, not a review. If you want to see my thoughts on this system, I have made a few reviews before. I'll add a playlist for that down below. So the most basic setup is with the pan motor by itself, most likely on a tripod, and you can use this female screw thread in the bottom to mount it onto your tripod, and this is where the revolver would really be handy because you can just put this on and then you can very quickly just take that off. And if you have another base on your slider, which I don't actually, you could just go over to your slider, drop that in, and you're good to go on the slider. You would then use this spring-loaded retractable 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch screw thread on the top to mount your ball head or your video head like this. Then, of course, you would mount your camera. You'd make sure that you have an NPF style battery inserted. And then you turn the power on with a long hold of the power button right here. So just like with the original slider motor, you can then click this power button once to cycle between 3 different speeds. Here I'll show you just how fast the movement actually looks at each of those speeds using a full frame camera with a 35mm lens attached for demonstration. So next to that power button, you have these arrows to physically rotate this in either direction. You can also double tap on one of those buttons for it to continuously move automatically, and then either double tap again or click both buttons to stop that movement. You can also set a point A and then double tap the power button to set that A point, then move over to your point B. Once again, double tap the power button to set that, and you'll hear beeps to confirm that each time. Then double tap the power button once more to start movement automatically between those 2 points. As you can see, it will stop automatically when it reaches the end, but if you want to continuously loop this motion, just hold down one of the arrow buttons and then tap the power button at the same time. Tap both of the buttons at the same time to stop that motion and to delete your A and B points. All of this works exactly the same as with the original slider motor. Around the other side, you have this USB port on here which you can use to supply power to the motor with a power delivery power bank or even a 5V 2A wall adapter, which is cool. Previously, you would have used this USB port to update firmware, but now that's done via the mobile app. There's also a 2.5mm jack on here for the shutter release cable, which you'll use for time lapses and things like that. These are not included, so do pick one up if you need it, but as far as I know, any release cable that's physically compatible with this port should work, even if it's not Zeapon brand. Now, just taking a close look at this motor before moving on to the next setup, you can also push both layers of the male screw threads down inside the motor body and then twist them to lock them in place. Now it's flat, and you can slide it easily into your backpack, or you can place it upside down so that the top part spins, and that lets you use it as a base for a motorized turntable, which is great for product B-roll, and this is something that I'll definitely be using a lot. Now there's another slot here on this motor, and that will be where you slide in the arm and tighten it down to connect the tilt motor. Of course, these two combined can also be used just like this on a tripod, but let's put it onto the Micro 2 Plus slider instead. Just a tip, mount these all with the buttons facing the same direction so it's easier to control from one side, not only physically, but when you set this up in the app, all of the directions using the joysticks will make sense. The tilt motor also has this arm here for mounting your camera, which is very similar in some ways to the arm of a gimbal. You can also slide this up and down, and you can adjust your camera forwards and backwards with the quick release plate. And you'll want to get this as balanced as possible, so that way the slider overall is stable, not tilting forwards or backwards. And how to do that is relatively simple, but it's not exactly like you might be used to with a gimbal. First off, to put your camera on here, they give you this Arca Swiss compatible quick release plate, and there are magnets on the bottom of that to make it easy to line up with the clamp on the bottom of the base and tighten it down. And this is quite a different design than typical quick release plates, which usually tighten from the side. So other Arca Swiss plates might fit, but it is tight, and the safety pins in the bottom usually get in the way. So if you do plan to use the slider, just use Zeapon's quick release plate, and that should work also on your other Arca Swiss style ball heads as well. It's also square, so it slides in either direction, which is handy. Once you get this balanced, just check the line on the side of that quick release plate and how it lines up with the markings on the base, so that way if you take this off, you can quickly just slide it back on again in that same position. So the simplest part of balancing this is just to raise or lower the camera to be more or less centered in line with the tilt axis of the motor. You can do this visually, and also this might be a little bit easier to do as the second step. So first, what you want to do is get this balanced, just the weight of the whole unit overall, so that way it's not pushing the whole slider forwards or backwards as it tries to fall in one direction. To do that, just remove the whole motor and arm like this and sit it on a table. Be careful that you don't drop it, but push the camera forwards and backwards until the whole setup feels pretty stable in the front-back direction on the table, so that way it won't feel like it wants to fall over. So now that we've done that, the weight is pretty much centered directly above the line of the slider underneath, and there's no stress trying to tilt the whole setup forwards or backwards. And that's what we're going for in terms of balance. So as we said, the quick release plate they give you is square, which means you can quickly turn your camera into the direction facing away from the motor, so that way you can get that spin like an inception roll type effect. And combined with the slider itself pushing in or out, it makes this shot really easy to get, and I find easier to control than with a gimbal, at least when you've only got shorter paths. So anyway, as we saw, we have physical controls on each of these motors, but when you combine 2 or 3, including the slider motor, the best way to make sure that they move all in sync is by using the app. So in the next video, we'll take a look at that. Again, I'll have a link to the playlist with that video and many others in the video description, as well as links where you can find all of these kits and parts and current pricing. So for now, thanks for watching.